Hi there and welcome to episode 9 of Behind the Business with myself, Steve Swift from Client Direction, and as always, my friend John. Hi John, how are you doing?
Hi Steve, I'm good, thanks. It's been a great week. One thing that I discovered this week is that my webcam has a brightness control. So hopefully I'm not blinding people quite so much this week. Other than that, I haven't really sat down for 5 minutes. How about yourself?
Yeah, it's very similar, to be fair. Busy as always. Coming up with new angles to help companies out and clients grow the business, which we're going to touch on in this week's episode, and in support of obviously the last 2 weeks where you've really deep dived quite heavily into the objection handling part of a business trying to land those deals and deal with customers' questions in the form of objections. And you've gone through that in such great detail. There's a lot of content in what you've said over the last 2 weeks episodes for Behind the Business regarding that topic and subject. So it's certainly something that the listeners and the viewers of the video side of things, rather than the iTunes and other such podcast downloads for the audio, can get a lot of value by going back and looking at that again. I would suggest any tips that you would give to them, John, with regard to the last 2 weeks.
I think just revisit it a couple of times and really just apply each bit as you go along. Don't run before you can walk, and make sure that you've got a cast iron plan in place, and really make sure that if you've thought about the person that you're potentially going to buy your product, you should have put yourself in their place, really. That's really the whole of the last 2 weeks has been about that, putting yourself in the client's place and saying, what if I was that person, what would I need to know? What would I need to do?
Yeah, and I think that leads really nicely onto this week's, which is more of the seller, the business owner looking back at that prospect in the form of when you get objections, you went through how to handle it. Today's episode, we're going to talk about the consolidation approach, which is basically handling those objections before they may actually raise their ugly heads by doing it through what I class as a selling cycle. And I'm going to go through some of that today. It's going to be fairly high level. I'll deep dive into some parts, but obviously, again, as always, it's a huge topic and it's something we can break down in future episodes and revisit this. So it's all about, in my experience, is about planting an idea in somebody's mind, a prospect that's shown an interest in what it is you have to offer them. They may have reached out to you. They may have seen something that you've put out to them. And then where do you go from there? And this is where you start the communication process. And I know you're going to touch on something you're doing at the moment, John, which is more offline rather than online. And that's something which I did quite a number of years ago. It's probably back in about 2007, 2008. I actually did direct response marketing. And that was a letter that physically went out. Yeah, for some of the younger viewers and listeners, we had to write a letter and we had to send it via Royal Mail or snail mail or pigeon post or whatever you wanted to nickname it. But it took time to get there. And by doing that, you need to stand out for the crowd. I know you're going to show people an example of what you're doing, which is fantastic. One thing I wanted to put on before you obviously just display what I know you're going to display, and then I'll go into the rest of the episode, is keep it clean, John, is that came across so wrong, didn't it? Newsflash, everybody, John's going to display. He's going to give himself a display, and let's see what that may be. So what I'm going to be basically going through now is when you're giving that perception to somebody, then it's all about that first impression. And one way you can do that, if you're going to do direct mail and sending letters out, is the stamp that you use. A lot of people use these automated franking machines, or they'll, God forbid, put a second-class stamp on. And I've received this in the past myself. It's an envelope that comes through, second-class stamp. You open it up, and it goes, immediate attention required. Hang on a second. Let's just backpedal a bit while John chokes on the water he's just been drinking there. And that is, how urgent is this, and how much attention do I need to apply to this right now, given you put a second-class stamp on rather than a first-class? Using a first-class stamp shows urgency. That corresponds nicely to when they open the envelope and read the headline on that letter. Again, it reaffirms this is urgent. Well, that's why we use a first-class stamp. Now, do you want to just jump in here, John, and just give it an extra little bit of of what you can add to the mix to stand out from the crowd on that.
Yeah, sure. And that's an important point you just made there, just as a throwaway there. It's about standing out. Because particularly in the world we live in now, which is a world of emails and video and everything else, there's a lot of noise, a lot of online noise.
A bit like me taking the lid off my water bottle. Just in case people listening wondering, what was that? Wasn't a squeaky door, it was my water bottle lid. Sorry, John, carry on.
Oh, no, that's fine. So it's about standing out. Well, in a world of noise and adverts, and as we've said, people getting interrupted, how do you stand out? Well, one of the ways you can do it is by doing something physical. And again, this is going to depend completely on your business model. He's going to come. Steve just put me right off there. I'm not quite sure what's going on. But
you said you need to do something physical.
Oh yeah, I see. Yeah. So you need to do something physical.
Yeah, there it is again.
And you need to be able to sort of to stop people in their tracks, to interrupt them and say, "Oh, that's different." So how do you do that? Well, depending on your business model, depending on what your business is, like what I'm about to show you wouldn't work for what Steve does.
No, it wouldn't.
But for what I do, it's perfect. Okay. So Steve was just talking about how do you make your letters stand out? Well, the first thing you do is you put a decent stamp on it. I know I've very flippantly said last week, if it's Christmas week, use a Christmas stamp, and there, if it's a large letter, do you use a large letter stamp or do you put 5 small letter stamps on? Those are the sort of things that will make you stand out. Make sure it's straight on the page. Make sure it's straight on the envelope. But the other thing you can do is you can do something like this. And this is something that I'm putting out now. I have a list of contacts like everybody else, and I contact them every so often. And I put out a newsletter. Now, the newsletter that I put out has got nothing to do with my business. It mentions my business because my business sponsors the newsletter, but it's about the content brings something to the person that's reading it. So hopefully they're going to want to keep that newsletter around, and they've got my details when they want an expert who knows all about things in the newsletter. But how do I make that stand out if I'm sending it to a medium to large company that's getting thousands or hundreds of letters a week that all look like that? Your standard white envelope. Well, you can do all sorts of things with it, but what I choose to do is, if you can see that,
keep going, let it focus.
It's very
there we go.
It's white, but I emboss my the focus has gone out there.
It has. And people listening thinking, what we're looking at. So John, just explain what you've got
on
your
envelope. What we're looking at is a standard white window envelope, but I've got an embosser. And I've embossed my logo onto the front of every envelope.
That's on the bottom right corner, isn't it?
In the bottom right corner, underneath where the stamp would be. So when that lands on somebody's desk, and it'll land on a named person's desk, they'll look at it and go, "Oh, what's that? Oh, what's that?" It's tactile because it's embossed. It's raised on the paper. And hopefully that will keep it from being thrown on the I'm not bothered about that pile.
Yeah.
Couple that with the content, which is all about driving massive value to the person that's reading it. They don't pay for this. I don't put a business card in there. I don't put a leaflet in there. The newsletter has got my website on it, but it's just there, And that's just an example of one of the things you can do. Now, if you've got an online business, how do you apply something like that to what you're doing? Now, that's the challenge. And it's something that Steve has spent years doing. As he said, he used to do what I'm doing in the business he was in at the time. He used to do that a long time ago. But in what he's learned to do and developed as a business model over the years, he's learned to apply that kind of thinking to an online business. And that's a real skill.
Well, that's it. And it's all about adapting, isn't it, John? And that's all I did with my business. Obviously, I've still got the knowledge and skill base and set of processes for doing offline material. In fact, I literally took a call today from a charity that's looking to help amputees get into supercar racing, go on these track days, and there's so much restrictions that they're not sure how they're going to go about it. I mean, they're speaking with some really high-end motorsport organizations at the moment. There's TV that's getting involved with it. There's some really big names that are looking to put a lot of money behind sponsorship to get it off the ground, and they've asked me to come on board to help with the media package side of things, which is how they present the offer, which is something I'm going to be discussing today, to the right people to get them to bite basically and respond in a way that they're going, this is something that interests me, I want to know more. And this obviously is why I mentioned that on the back of what you just said, because what I used to do was very offline. It was showing people how to start a business from home and then grow that from being their secondary income. When it was consistently making more every week or every month than their main source of income, and it did that consistently, then they could look at making that their plan A and ditch the plan B, which meant they didn't have to answer to a boss anymore. It was a program called Become Your Own Boss, and that was a physical product, but it encapsulated online presence. So it was showing you how you built the business with a physical book that got sent every month to my subscribers. And in that, I would give them various additional bonus products, which would enhance what that module and what that stage of the modules would have got them to. And then they could apply that. And it was starting to build an online business using an offline method initially and then converting them. So it attracted quite a big audience, and it did very well. And that was, like I say, that was back in like 2007, 2008, something like that. What I'm doing now is trying to grab people's attention online. And like you said, there's a lot of noise out there. So for those that have to be online, there's a number of things you can do. One of the biggest terms that's used is pattern interrupt. And that's where when people are scrolling through all the time, that something, it just grabs their attention like that. And they go, whoa, what was that? And they scroll back down to see what it was. And then they see something it could be really colourful. That was one that a lot of people use. They use bright yellow and blue borders around an image. And it just made it pop. It made it stand out from the rest of the noise. It was different. There was another one, a great example was a very brightly coloured rainbow-looking unicorn. It was a fantastic piece of marketing. I mean, I tipped my hat to the people that did it because it was on point, and it got so much viral attention. It helped them grow the business. But that's what they did for their clients. So once you've grabbed their attention, you're then into the phases of consolidation, which is part of the selling cycle, which goes hand in hand with the objection handling that you were discussing last week. So if we cover some points on that next, and then hopefully people will get some extra value on what they can apply to their current pitch process to turn it from a sales pitch, because nobody likes to be sold to, as you alluded to the other week. Nobody likes that. But if you can present something in a way that shows somebody that actually they do have this big pain or this big problem, and that what they're hearing is actually a solution. So in their mind, they start saying to you, we could do with this, couldn't we? And you're going, well, if you think you need it, then I'll agree with you. And you can do this, can't you? Yes, I can. So can you help us with this? Would you like me to? Well, yes, I would. How do I pay you? In a nutshell, really, I mean, I know that is really perfect world scenario, and it's very short snippeted, but that is basically the very, very bare bones of the process. But what do you add into that to give it a bit more meat on the bone for the listeners and the viewers that they can apply it to the business? Well, what I did was I had 4 quotes that I did for a client. They were struggling to close businesses. This was a couple of weeks ago, and I used this process to do it. And all I did was, initially it was done on that common ground theory, where you use your icebreakers, you find out something that's of interest to them. So you take it away from what the pitch is initially. It's a distraction, basically, because they're expecting to be sold to. And then all of a sudden, I come at them at a completely different angle, and I teach people the right scripting and how to handle this as part of the course I offer, to actually get them past that initial blockage of defenses are really high, you're going to sell me something, and I don't want to be sold to. And then all of a sudden, you turn that around by not selling to them. Now, what you need to look at in business is, what is it that you're currently doing? What is your openers to a selling cycle? Are you actually trying to go straight for the throat and sell them something? Do you start off by saying, I can help you, or my business will give you this? Well, if it says you give, that's halfway there. But if you say, my business puts you in a better position, or puts your stressors to rest or puts your business in front of the right clients. There's no hassle, there's no hardship. It's not a difficult task to do because we're going to put you there. And if it puts, and just having that S on the end, psychologically has a different impact on people's thought process. So this is what people, I would suggest, want to be having a look at in the business is, how do you open your pitch? What words are you using, and what is it you're actually thinking about? So when you've got that in mind and you go at it not expecting anything in return, not selling to anybody, just purely almost fact finding. But as you go through that process and you're speaking to them and you put something to them, so it could be, excuse me, for an example, putting myself right in the spot again. I did this the other week and I felt the pressure, but I'll rise to the challenge, John. And that is, say you're looking for somebody that's after some new fencing for the garden, for example. Okay, nice easy one, because I know I touched on landscaping before, and I've just had some new fencing done in my garden as well, so it's quite topical.
I'll take a quote for that if you don't mind. We've got a fence that you're doing it there.
I can certainly highly recommend a few people. So I'll drop the links and show notes after this. So what the process there was to have somebody come in and give us a quote. Now, the person that did it, I gave them some tips and some suggestions because I've had a few people come around previously, and it was appalling. Because yes, I needed something, and they knew I needed it because I could see the state of the fence. So they just thought, this is an easy sell. I've got this in the bag already. That is the wrong mindset. If you think you've already got the business before the money's hit your bank account after delivering the service or the product, you are potentially losing more business than you are even aware of, because people aren't going to tell you to your face. They're just going to go and buy somewhere else, and then all of a sudden you're going to do a follow-up with them, you know, a couple of days later or a couple of weeks later. And I've had that when we were looking at getting some new windows and doors fitted in the house a number of years ago. And I got a phone call 18 months later from a very respectable double glazing company saying, just wanted to check in. How did you think you did with our quote? Well, your quote was appalling. It was about 5 times higher than anybody else, and I had it done 18 months ago. So your follow-up call is way out. So, you know, straight away, they were on the back foot. So when you're actually pitching to somebody, don't pitch to them. Ask them questions. Because if you're trying to sell to somebody and you're talking more to them than they're giving you information back, how are you supposed to know whether or not you're a good fit for them and they actually want what you've got to offer? That's the other side of things. So when you sorry, I've just got a bit distracted. I think the video footage went a little bit glitchy.
I was going to say we're running a bit slow there, Steve, but your voice is still coming through, so we'll carry on.
Oh, unlucky for those that can still hear me then.
Hopefully your face will catch up with
it. Well, you know, lots of other things have caught up with me over the years. But what I'm basically trying to get here is, when you're going through the selling cycle, you want to be talking to people by asking them questions. And then you want to shut up, basically, and say nothing. If you're talking more than 10% to somebody throughout the entire presentation, if you like, you're talking too much. They should be doing the majority of the talking, because that's where you're going to find out what their pain is, what their biggest problem is, what their why is for having you there, or even looking into what you've got to offer. And you'll also find out what the urgency is as well. And if they've found other quotations, for example, like the fencing one, you know, you don't tend to just get one quote and then go for it. You tend to get 2 or 3 possibly. And you look for recommendations and reviews. And some people go more for the price, some people go more for reviews, and so on. And that's a whole new topic. But when you're actually listening to people and you actively listen and you take it in, you know how to respond to that by saying very few words, but there will be the right words that don't convince people, but reassure people that you are the right person for the job, because you understand what their needs are, because you've been actively listening. So every time they tell you some information, you can consolidate that. And by that, I mean, it could be initially, so what part of your fencing are you looking to actually have repaired? Well, basically, and they'll go into an old spiel about how long the fence has been there and how many times they've painted it and how many times they've done repairs. All the information that you're not really bothered about knowing, but you need to listen, because in there will be little key elements that will help you. because then when you actually come to consolidate that part of your pitch, you can say, oh, well, it's quite interesting. I hear a lot of people that do tend to do repairs, and as you've said yourself, they don't last too long. So you've gone to the time and effort of spending money on materials to patch something, and like you're saying, you bust your thumb on that one and you got black nails, I think, you didn't quite catch it right. But it hasn't really worked because you've had to go back and do it again, which is a bit of a pain, really, isn't it? And as you've said, it looks really messy. Whereas if you invest something a little bit more up front, it's going to last long term. Would that be fair to say? They're then going to agree with you. Bang, consolidated. They're happy with what you've just said because you've reaffirmed them that you've understood their situation. And then you go on to the next part. So when you're looking at actually getting your fencing done, and I do apologize if you say my dog just woofing on the floor underneath, which is keeping me company today, is you go to the next stage, and that is, so what's the urgency? We obviously understand that you're needing it, but how quick do you want this done? I'm not pushing because I want your business now. I'm just trying to understand where you are, because I can then look at our schedule to see when we might be able to fit you in. You've then put doubt in their mind that they might not be able to get your services, but it also at the same time tells them that you're a busy person, you're in demand, therefore you are probably very good at your job. Because if you had all the time in the world, how good are you? So again, you've planted that seed of reassurance once again. And you follow this process, and it goes on for a number more steps, but you do the same thing at each step of the way. You consolidate, you reaffirm what they've just said, you almost repeat them. And then you ask for confirmation that they understand, or that they're happy, or do they have any questions about that? So based on that we've said, would you be happy to do business with us? Absolutely. Well, that's fantastic. Should we now talk about the styling of the fence you want? And then you go to the next part. And so if we're able to deliver this style of fencing for you at this height using these kind of fixings, would that be strong enough for your needs? Yes. Would it give you the privacy that you're looking for that you mentioned earlier? Yes, it would. So you'd be happy to go ahead with something like that. We'll get to price in a minute, but just based on that, would you be happy? Absolutely. And you go through all the assurances, you go through the insurance that the company has, the people that they actually use as staff, how well they're trained, the accreditations they might have. If it's roofing, they might need to have something called BBA approved wood boarding, which is a specific type of grade for doing roofing. And then you say, we're accredited with these, so then you've got credibility. Would you be happy to do business with a company that has these accreditations? Well, absolutely. Well, we hold them. So I suppose that's safe to say that you'd be happy to do business with us knowing that. Oh, absolutely, I would, yeah. What you're actually doing here is not just consolidating and reaffirming, you're stopping objections coming at the end, but also they are buying into you as a person and as a business owner, and that you are the only solution for their problem. If they've already a few quotes already, chances are the other people have come in and gone, yeah, no problem at all, you need your fence doing, and they've just walked off, got the tape measure out, measured it, and going, right, okay, well, you're going to need X amount of panels, so many posts, gravel boards here, one thing and another. Right, yeah, no problem. I'll get you a quote over. We're probably free next week. Would that fit for you? All of a sudden, you're being quite demanding and quite ruthless. There's no empathy. There's no understanding. And you've not done any fact-finding whatsoever. You've just told somebody what you're going to give them. And they're probably going to smile at you and go, that's great, thanks very much. Look forward to getting your quote. And as soon as they drive off your street, they're like, we're not getting them in.
Yeah.
They've not listened. Which is what you said, John, wasn't it, last week?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're not bothered enough about your prospect to ask to be interested, why on earth would you expect your prospect to be interested in anything you have to say? It comes down to that, really.
Yeah,
it really does, because people buy from people they like, and people like people who show an interest in them.
it is. That's exactly it.
And what Steve's talking about, and that was a fantastic summary of the process, Steve. That's absolutely, if go back, play that back, make notes, do what you need to do. Steve's talking about what used to be called a yes ladder. And the reason that those are important from a psychological point of view is if you can get people, if you ask open questions to people, they're going to give you open answers. That's the first thing. And that's where your gold is. That's also how you ensure that you're not talking too much. Ask an open question, people will give you a full answer. And it'll take you down the route you need to go down. But also, what it means is that you're getting the information you need, you get an agreement from the client, And people, as I've said before, people don't like making themselves into liars. They're much more likely to agree that they've already agreed than when you get somebody in who says, I'll do you 6 panels next week. Does that work? I don't know. I don't know how much it costs. Well, you've got them to say, I don't know. In their mind, they're going, I really don't know. But if you've said to them, look, put price aside for a moment. If we can do it for the right price, we can do 6 panels for you next week. Would that work for you? Yes, it would. Same question. Same result. Well, same question, completely different result, actually, because of the way you put it. The first way, no interest in that client at all. Just we've got an hour to spare next week. Can we can we rob you for it? or look, we're not saying we're going to do it, but we're saying we can do it. If we can do it and we can agree terms, do you want us to do it? Well, who's going to say no to that? Bang, you've got tacit consent. Now all you have to do is the price. There's a great story, Steve, which I've just remembered, which I'm going to throw in. It's about Oscar Wilde.
Okay.
Oscar Wilde was at a dinner party, and there was a woman sat beside him, and she said to him, or he said to her, would you sleep with me for £1 million? And she said, yeah, of course I would. And he said, all right. And then, the meal carried on a bit, and then he leant across and he said, would you sleep with me for £1? And she said, no, of course I wouldn't. What kind of a woman do you think I am? And he said, well, we've already established what kind of woman you are. Now we're just haggling over the price. Which I think is a great story because it's got so many applications. I mean, it's hilarious. But again, the conversation, the result is the same, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, I'll pass back to you, Steve.
Okay.
I just reminded me of that little anecdote. I really like that anecdote.
We'll throw that one in, but it's right what you're saying there, John. It's a lot of the time people will think, whether they're in business or whether it's somebody buying, that everything is based on price. But people buy from people. They buy because they've got confidence in that person. They buy because they know that person's invested time to understand what their needs are, true needs are. And it's like anything, no questions means you don't understand. Ask the questions, zip it, listen, let them just, excuse the terminology, but basically let them vomit over you. Literally, just spill it all and actively listen. Look at them when they're talking, because then they'll know that you are actually listening. Now, I'm not saying stare them down and freak them out, but, be empathetical. Your body language says so much. Tilting your head slightly to one side, casually nodding and gesturing, and maybe even making some notes if you need to, depending on what your business and type is. If you're an accountant, you might jot a few notes down on what they're saying about past experiences and values and the sort of different things they're wanting to put on ledgers and what problems they've had with tax returns. They'd make some notes so they remember, so they can then consolidate that as they go through their presentation. So you need to do all those as part of it. And like you said, John, I've given a really good example there, but I've only scratched on the surface. But it's such a big topic. That's why it's a big part of the modules in the course. Because if you only know part of a recipe, you're not going to be able to bake a full cake. It's not going to taste very nice. It's not going to turn out. It's the same thing in business with a process. There's lots of different parts to certain processes, some more than others, depending on what that process is. And that's why I've spent so many years understanding it firsthand with my own businesses. So yes, I've made mistakes along the way in the early years, but that's how you learn from that. I've had mentors that's helped me many, many years ago. I still learn even today. I've mentioned it in previous episodes. I like to look to learn something new every day because it keeps me on my toes, and it means that I'm one step ahead of everybody else. That puts me in a slightly different category to anybody and everybody that does what I do, because I always like to try and be able to deliver something that little bit more. Now, that's not bragging or boasting or trying to impress anybody. It's more a case of impressing upon somebody my level of expertise, and that I still invest in my knowledge to make sure I can give my clients the best results. And one that I'll share with you, what happened literally last week. with a client I've been working with down in Nottingham in the UK, is they were struggling to generate interest from new prospects to buy their products from them. So I discussed this with the director. I went down, we had a conversation. They paid me obviously a lot more money for going down there rather than just doing it, on the course, but that's fine. They had the budget to do it. And I went down there and I explained what the process was. After having watched and listened what their staff were doing, I identified straight away that they were getting on the phone and they were trying to sell rather than listen, actively get the information, and then look to present something to serve that person's needs. I then took it one step further and I said to the director, can I jump on a call? Because what I want to do is I want to show you the process in action and see how far through a call I will get when other people are getting a no very quickly. And it's because of the tonality they use. It's because of the words that they're using to go with the tonality, because obviously on a phone, you can't use your body language to gesture and try and press upon people what you're trying to deliver for them. 10-minute phone call, John. 10 minutes from a cold call, and the client emailed through before I hung up the phone a purchase order number for £10,500. Now, I'm not saying I can get £10,500 from every 10-minute phone call. It was a good one for me, I'll be honest, and it's something I have done previously before, many times, but it's not something that happens every time within 10 minutes. Sometimes the call will take longer. It might take a follow-up email and then another follow-up call. So it might be a process over a few days, maybe, rather than just a few minutes. It all depends on your type of business, but it goes to prove the process works. All you've got to do is follow it step by step, and don't try and reinvent the wheel when something works repeatedly and consistently. Because as soon as you go, well, I can make that better, but if it's working and it's getting you more results than what you've been getting, it's already working better than what you were previously doing.
That's right.
So, don't try and go into it, work with it. And then if you need more, ring me up and we'll go to the next level, because there's other things you do as you scale a business as well. But scaling is, again, separate topic from what we're discussing here, which is the consolidation thing. And that just goes to prove that if I can go into a business and have a 10-minute conversation and someone will part with 10.5 grand, and I've done that with other companies where it's taken 3 years to get to 10 million from a standing start, that kind of gives an idea of the difference between just getting some business in and scaling a business. So, but the processes that we used in both scenarios was all the same. It was handling the objections that you went across in the last 2 episodes and then consolidating as you go through that process. So as I said earlier on to people that's listening and watching this, watch the first part again where I explained about how you deal with consolidation, and look at what you are doing in your business right now. What do you say as an opener? And then how much do you talk during your presentation? So, John, is there anything that you want to add on to the back of that at all?
No, I think that's pretty consistent and concise, Steve. I think definitely you've gone through a really important process there that people need to revisit, and just look at, if you're looking at how much you talk in a conversation, look at how you're using those conversational hooks to ask open questions and get the information you need, and really revisit what we were talking about last week, which is what are the objections and why are they likely to object to that. So in other words, what do they actually need to know from you, and what do you need to know from them in order to tell them what they need to know? Because it's a two-way communication. But I think, Steve, that's an awful lot of information for 1 week.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I like to deliver.
Once we got over the initial giggles, not sure what happened there. Can only apologise, ladies and gentlemen. But Steve's given you some homework there, although he didn't highlight it as homework. But go away and do that. Is there anything else you want to add to the homework, Steve, before we?
No, I think if I'm very much a case of listen, take on board what I've said, make the notes that make sense to you. So when you read them back, you understand them. I could give lots of show notes out every single episode, but I've come across this before where you'll get a pack from people, and if you're never going to speak to them ever again, it's going to rub off and it's wearing out, and then you won't understand what some of the terminology will actually mean. But if you write the notes that make sense to you, when you read it back through, it's like, oh yeah, I remember what that was. Then you can take the action. So listen back through it, make your own notes relevant to your business and what you say right now. And then I will guarantee you, if you apply that and really look to make some changes, and if you're struggling, then fine enough, reach out to us. That's what we're here for. But I'll guarantee you one thing. If you use the process I've gone through today, consolidation creates wealth. Simple as that. And if you couple it with the objections, the topics that John covered in the last 2 weeks, you're going to have yourself a really strong fire in business to go in sync with all the other episodes we've done so far to get you to the point where this content will be a lot more powerful than if we'd have done this in week 1. And again, that's why we're doing things in the order that we're doing. It's not to slow your process down or your progress down. It's to make sure you're doing things at the right time and at the right stage to have the maximum impact in the quickest time possible. So you go, flipping heck, that's transformed my business. And then who knows, you might contact John or myself or both of us saying, look, we need more of what you've been giving, but we need it like really bespoke to our business. And that's absolutely fine. We're both equipped to do that. We've both done it for many, many years. And that's absolutely fine. We've both got our own courses, but we've also got the bits where we can do one-on-one. And obviously that comes at higher ticket. But let's say one thing in closing. If someone was going to charge you, I don't know, 50 grand, and they were going to make you £1,000 a month, would you pay them 50 grand? No, you wouldn't. But if someone was going to say, pay me or invest in me the amount of 5 grand, and I'm going to make you £50,000, would you do it? Chances are you're going to say yes, because you can see what you're going to get. Whereas with the other analogy, it'd be a waste of money. So again, there's a bit more to it than that, but you kind of get the impression that what I'm trying to get across to you is you invest in people that's already had the results. I've shared a number of results over the episodes with you. John's shared different things he's done with his clients over the years as well. So again, if you're not sure about whether we're the right people to work with, the best thing is book a clarity call with either of us and we can have a conversation about it. I'll guarantee you one thing, and I think I speak for John here, and two, do put me right if I'm speaking out of turn, John, but by the end of any clarity call you have with either John or myself, you will get just that. You'll get clarity, whether it's in your personal mind space or whether it's within your business. So you will get value out of your time. And the calls are completely free. So you've got nothing to lose by in 45 minutes of one day out of the entire year. But if that 45 minutes suddenly makes you another 10, 15, 20% in sales, it helps you streamline your process. It helps you clear the clutter in here that's slowing down your actual business mindset to make your next million. And I don't say those numbers flippantly. It's fact. That's the sort of people we work with. But we've worked with people that's just starting out or in early phases, and also those that are already there and looking to go to 8 and 9 figures even. So that's why we're doing things that we are. Bit of a preach, bit of a preach session going on there. Don't mean to, but it's just to get across, the point of what we're doing in these episodes. And I really do hope if you're listening and then taking action, you should be getting results. Even from episode 1, you should have got a change in your business of some sort. If you haven't, you've not listened, you've not understood, so you need to go back through and listen again. You need to make those notes that make sense to you, and then you need to apply it. You need to take action if you want change to happen. So that about wraps things up, I think, John.
Yep, I think so. And as ever, subscribe on YouTube. Listen to us on your favourite podcast provider. And we'll be here again next week with more amazing content.
Sounds good. Till next week. Take care.
Bye-bye.